Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and this is my trusty Theraflu. It actually works. It's pretty good. I don't know whether it's because they put junk in it or because it's just warm, but it certainly helps to get the job done. And I also have teeth now. I'm starting to slowly recover my dignity, what little I have left. So here we have 6 works whose success irritated, annoyed, and disturbed their composers to no end for a variety of reasons. And these are kind of fun pieces to talk about because, it's very funny when a composer writes something, it becomes enormously popular, and they can either bask in their success or they can get pissed because they wrote other things that they think are so much better and that no one pays attention to. Well, we have a little of both here, I think. Some basking and some irritation. But we begin with Sibelius, the Valse Triste. Now, the Valse Triste was written as incidental music for Kuolima, death. Death comes for the maiden, and they do a waltz. Well, not really, but that's sort of the concept, They dance with death. It's all very poetic. Anyway, Sibelius sold the thing to a publisher who bought it outright. No royalties. It became enormously popular in every conceivable arrangement, and Sibelius spent most of the rest of his life trying to repeat the success, writing fluffy bits of frivolity that his wife was disgusted with, his sweet mignon and the sweet champetre, the other Valse thingies, and nobody cared. Because, there's value in scarcity, and the attention of the public is short, and nobody wants Valse Triste Part 2. They just want the original Valse Triste that everyone's humming. So, got everybody kind of hysterical, and Sibelius was very annoyed that this was successful, and he got no income from it, or very little. He sold it for $1.50, and it made like billions. So there you go. There's your first example of a composer who was really annoyed. I don't think he was annoyed with the success of it. He was annoyed that he didn't profit from the success of it. So that's number 1. Number 2, Beethoven, his Septet. Now, the Septet is a lovely, congenial, attractive, relaxing, mellow, sunny, charming bit of sort of post-Mozartian fluff. And Beethoven was not a fluff composer. Just ask him. He was furious that the Septet became incredibly famous, and everybody loved it when he was writing symphonies and concertos and stuff that nobody cared about. Major chamber works, string quartets. No, they wanted the Septet. Excuse me. So, yeah, that really pissed off Beethoven, and he had disparaging things to say about the Septet and everybody who listened to it. Well, Beethoven had disparaging things to say about everybody, but it was really irritating to him, and I can understand that because Beethoven was revolutionizing music, and while everyone ran away screaming from the Eroica, they embraced the Septet. Oh, the poor man. And he probably made no money from that either. So there you go. Next, Mahler, his second movement, the second movement of the Third Symphony. What the flowers in the meadow tell me? His Blumenstück, as he called it, the flower piece. Charming, lovely, sensual, gorgeous music. So suave, so sophisticated, so stylized, so artificial. Mahler just was furious that people enjoyed that because he said, everyone is going to now look at me as a perfumed singer of nature, when what they don't realize is that nature contains everything that is also fearful and imposing and terrifying. And he embodied all of that, of course, in the enormous Third Symphony. It's a little bit like the Beethoven situation because Beethoven was pissed that people didn't want to hear his bigger, more serious works. Well, the second movement of the Third Symphony is, of course, embedded in the Third Symphony, which is the longest symphony ever written in the general repertoire that ever gets performed regularly. And so, and the whole piece is an evolutionary journey from inert, inanimate nature, to the birth of life, to plants, then animals, then mankind, and then religion, and then beyond religion to spiritual oneness and love and God and all that stuff. Over all of it, it's quite an ambitious piece. And to just take this little floral excerpt was definitely going to cause some annoyance. But on the other hand, it got played. And Mahler was not in a position to argue about people who wanted to perform his music, even if they would only do this little excerpt to sugar the pill, as it were. So that was the third one. The fourth one, well, that's Enescu, his Romanian Rhapsody number 1. I mean, people tend to think of Enescu as a one-shot wonder, and he was kind of a mess compositionally. I mean, he wrote things and didn't in his head. He always said, where is your second string quartet? And they don't ma tête. It's in my head. And they'd say, well, write it down. And he'd say, well, I'll get to it. Well, he never got to it quite often. So he would design like an opus with a group of works, opus 42, numbers 1, 2, and 3. And then he'd just write number 2. So, and he left a lot of incomplete work, and there's a lot of early work, and his style was extremely technically intricate. Even the Romanian Rhapsody number 1, if you actually look at the score, I mean, it's a marvel of precision and timbral subtlety, and it's just a razzle-dazzle showpiece, of course, for the most part. But my goodness, I mean, the harp writing and the strings, it's really an extraordinarily detailed piece of writing. But a lot of people don't even know there is a number 2. I've played Romanian Rhapsody number 2. It has a suspended cymbal part, lucky me. And I played that. And it's lovely, but it's mostly quiet and contemplative. It's not a noisy showpiece like number 1 is. And then, of course, he wrote 3 gigantic symphony. I mean, symphonies are like ginormous, post-Straussian, chromatic, post-Wagnerian, Scriabin-esque, whatever you want to call them. And tons of other music as well, chamber works and the orchestral suites, and they're splendid, but they're much more elusive and difficult to grasp. Enescu sort of dripped music. There were notes everywhere, flying all over the place. And that can make his music sound kind of clogged up, like I'm kind of clogged up. But the Romanian Rhapsody number 1 was the only piece anybody cared about, and it must have galled him. Well, it did gall him. We know it did, but I feel for him. I really do, because he was one of the most amazingly gifted musicians of the first half of the 20th century. He really was. And he wrote extraordinary music that's really worth getting to know. But it's not easy. And the Romanian Rhapsody is easy. So what do you want? Next, Ravel, the Pavane for a Dead Princess. Pavane pour une infante défunte. He chose that title because he just liked the way it sounded in French. I mean, when I was studying French, we used to make up sentences that were like impossible to pronounce in French because they spelled everything differently, but they all sounded the same. Like, ce sens, 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 sens. They are 100 meaningless sounds. Ce sont 100. Though they are. Ce sont, S-O-N-T. Sens, C-E-N-T. Sounds, S-O-N-S. Sans, S-A-N-S. Sens, S-E-N-S. Ce sont, sens, 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 sens. They are 100 sounds without sense. Well, Pavane pour un infante défunte is like that. You've got to get all your gutturals and all those nasal vowels. It's good to pronounce like I am now when you have a cold. Anyway, it was hugely popular. Everybody played it. And after one famous performance of the Pavane for a Dead Princess, Ravel, the pianist came up to him and said, "Hey, how'd you like it, huh? Well, pretty cool, huh?" And Ravel said to him, "Monsieur, I have composed a Pavane for a dead princess, not a dead Pavane pour une princesse." Yeah, good line. Actually, it works very well in French, too. What is it? J'ai composé un Pavane pour un infante défunte, non une défunte Pavane pour une infante. Something like that. It worked quite well. And last but not least, this is a biggie, Holst's The Planets. I mean, it's the only thing anybody cares about that Holst wrote. And he wrote a lot more, and a lot of very interesting music. Fascinating music. I mean, his Sanskrit stuff, the choral hymns from the Rig Veda, Savitri, that amazing little chamber opera, the choral symphony, the Hymn of Jesus, which is probably his masterpiece, all kinds of fantastic pieces. The band suites, of course, are very well known in woodwind circles. But the Planets became enormously famous, so much so that Holst actually had a business card made that said something like, Gustav, it was Gustav, he was English, it wasn't Gustav. Gustav Holst, composer of more than the planets, or something like that. You know, he was so annoyed at the success of the piece, which I think actually was a little bit snooty of him, because, you know, beggars can't be choosers, especially if you're an English contemporary composer. How many pieces are you going to write? And if you get one smash hit, that's a pretty good thing. And his daughter, Imogen, whatever her name was, you know, when she wrote a book on Holst, and she trashed the Planets. I don't understand why. I mean, she was following, obviously, in her father's footsteps and reflecting his wishes about what a terrible piece it is. And the worst number in the Planets, she says, of course, is the most popular one, Jupiter, the one with all the great tunes, the one that sounds marvelous, the one that everybody loves. No, no, no. It has all kinds of formal defects. It was just so depressing. I'll never forget reading that bio. It's like awful what she does to the Planets and what he did to the Planets. I mean, these people had some sort of, I don't know, puritanical, you know, self-hating something about them. Because the Planets is wonderful. Everybody loves it. And good for him that he wrote the damn thing. Of course, people wanted him to write more planets, but there was only one more planet, Pluto, which hadn't been discovered. And then it was deplanetized. So he covered them all already. There was nothing else he could do in that particular field. And so he was pissed, royally pissed. So there you have it, my friends. 6 works that really annoyed their composers because they were successful for a variety of reasons. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.